The observation deck of the Zaltarian research vessel hummed with quiet energy as commander. Velrix studied the newest species to join the Galactic Coalition, and her violet eyes narrowed with scientific curiosity as she watched the human delegation. Bored through the docking, Lieutenant Kessa leaned closer to her commander and whispered with barely contained excitement that these humans were unlike any species they had documented before, and Velrix nodded slowly because the preliminary biological reports had raised numerous questions about human capabilities that seemed to defy standard galactic norms. The human named Jake stepped forward first, and his casual smile immediately caught the attention of every female Zaltarian in the room because his relaxed confidence was unusual among newly contacted species, and the way he moved suggested a physical capability that their sensors had detected but seemed too improbable to believe. Beside him walked his colleague named Sophie, and her bright eyes scanned the alien technology with genuine wonder rather than fear. And the third human named Marcus carried himself with quiet strength that made the Zaltarians exchange uncertain glances because their species had never encountered beings quite like these before. Velrix approached the humans and extended her hand in the greeting gesture their cultural database had provided, and Jake took it firmly but gently, and his skin was warm compared to her cool touch, and she felt an unexpected flutter of something unfamiliar in her chest. "Welcome to the Helios station," she said in carefully practiced English, "and we have prepared quarters for your stay during the cultural exchange program, and I am Commander Velrix of the Zaltarian Science Corps." Jake grinned, replied that they were grateful for the hospitality, and looked forward to learning about Zaltarian civilization, and Disk. Sophie added that the technology alone was worth the light years of travel, and Marcus simply nodded. With respectful acknowledgement, the tour began immediately, and Velrix led them through corridors of crystalline architecture that refracted light in ways that made Sophie gasp with delight, and Jake asked technical questions that surprised the commander, because they revealed a sophisticated understanding of physics that contradicted their species. Young spacefaring status, they reached the biological research wing, and Velrix felt her throat tighten slightly because this was where the truly awkward questions would need to be asked, and Lieutenant Kessa had volunteered to assist with the more delicate inquiries about human reproduction and physical limitations. The humans were invited into a comfortable lounge area, and Medical Officer Lyra joined them with data tablets and scanning equipment, and her silver hair caught the light as she settled into a seat across from Jake, and her cheeks held a faint purple tint that indicated nervousness. Lyra began explaining that the Galactic Coalition required biological assessments of all new species for medical compatibility and safety protocols, and the humans nodded agreeably, and Sophie mentioned that they had expected such procedures and had prepared comprehensive medical records. But Lyra continued, and her voice dropped slightly as she explained that certain aspects of human biology had confused their xenobiologists, particularly regarding reproductive capabilities and endurance metrics that seemed to exceed what their models predicted. As possible, Jake raised an eyebrow and asked what specifically was confusing, and Lyra glanced at Velrix, who gave an encouraging nod, and the medical officer took a breath before stating that their preliminary scans suggested humans could engage in reproductive activities with a frequency and duration that seemed physically impossible. Sophie laughed, and the sound was musical and unguarded, and she said that humans did have fairly robust systems compared to what they had learned about other species, and Marcus added dryly that evolution on Earth had been particularly competitive in certain departments. Velrix leaned forward and asked directly if it was true that human males could mate multiple times in succession without significant recovery periods and without experiencing equipment failure, as it were, and her scientific detachment cracked slightly as purple bloomed across her cheekbones. Jake looked amused rather than offended and confirmed that yes, human males typically could perform multiple times, especially when young and healthy, and the refractory period was usually measured in minutes, 2 hours, rather than days or weeks. Like many species, and catastrophic failure was extremely rare barring medical conditions. Zaltarian women in the room exchanged shocked glances and whispered among themselves. It's because male Zaltarians could mate, perhaps. twice in a month before needing extended recovery and physical damage was a genuine concern with overexertion, and the idea of multiple performances in a single day seemed like dangerous fiction. Kessa blurted out that such a thing was impossible, and surely the human was exaggerating because no organic system could sustain that level of activity without breaking down, and the human reproductive organ must be made of some kind of reinforced biological material unknown to galactic science. Marcus chuckled and explained that human males had evolved under unique pressures on Earth, where competition for mates had been intense for millions of years, and the cardiovascular system, bone density, and tissue regeneration capabilities of humans were all optimized for endurance rather than raw power. Sophie added that human females also had remarkable endurance and could engage in extended, intimate activities without the exhaustion that apparently plagued other species, and she mentioned that human stamina in general was something that set them apart in many physical activities. Lyra pulled up comparison charts on her tablet and showed them data from 17 different species, and pointed out that the average galactic male required between 3 to 6 weeks of recovery after a single mating, and the human claims suggested they could perform that same act dozens of times in the same period. Jake shrugged and said that was about right for a healthy human male in his prime, and added that historical records from Earth showed some individuals with even more impressive capabilities, though he admitted those were outliers. And Sophie mentioned that human cultures had developed entire industries and art forms around these capabilities. The Zaltarian women seemed simultaneously fascinated and skeptical, and Velric suggested they run controlled tests if the humans were willing, and Jake agreed readily, saying that scientific understanding was the whole point of the cultural exchange, and Marcus nodded, though he added they should keep things professional and appropriate. Over the following weeks, the research continued, and the humans participated in various physical assessments that confirmed their remarkable endurance across all categories, and they could run for hours, while most species tired in minutes, and their strength to weight ratio exceeded expectations, and their recovery from exertion was notably rapid. The reproductive capability testing remained the most shocking revelation, and with proper medical monitoring and willing Zaltarian volunteers, the research team documented that Jake could indeed perform 4 times in a 6-hour period with no signs of physical damage or distress, and his vital signs remained stable. Throot Vitals found herself drawn to Jake beyond professional interest, and his easy humor and genuine kindness made her hearts flutter in ways she had never experienced. And during one evening meal in the station cafeteria, she asked him about human relationships and bonding practices. Jake explained that humans formed pair bonds for emotional reasons as much as reproductive ones, and love was a complex emotion that combined physical attraction with intellectual compatibility and emotional connection, and many humans maintained monogamous relationships for years or even lifetimes. She asked if humans ever bonded with other species, and Jake said that they could and would if the emotional connection was there. And physical compatibility could usually be worked out with patience and creativity, and the most important thing was mutual respect and genuine affection. Velix felt her face warm and admitted that she had never considered bonding with an alien species before, but that the past weeks had challenged many of her assumptions, and Jake smiled gently and said that new experiences were what made life interesting, and that he found Zaltarian culture and people fascinating there. Relationship developed slowly and carefully, and they spent hours talking about their respective worlds and comparing philosophies. And Art and Jake taught her about human music, and she showed him Zaltarian crystal singing, and the cultural exchange became deeply personal. Lieutenant Kessa had formed a friendship with Marcus, and Sophie had begun a romance with one of the Zaltarian civilian scientists named Tyrus, and the humans' integration into station life became seamless and natural, and their presence changed the dynamic of the entire facility. One evening, Velrix invited Jake to her private quarters, and they sat together, looking out at the stars, and she asked him if he thought humans and Zaltarians could truly be compatible beyond friendship. And Jake took her hand and said that compatibility was about more than biology. He explained that successful relationships required communication and patience and willingness to understand differences, and that Physical intimacy, while important, was only one part of a larger emotional and intellectual connection, and that he believed any two beings who truly cared for each other could find ways to make things work. Velrix leaned against him and felt his warmth and steady heartbeat, and admitted that she had feelings for him that went beyond SC.